I have been married to the president for a year, and no one knows my relationship with him, until I entered the wrong conference room. The department leader scolded me in public for being brainless. The man sitting at the head of the seat helped me out in a whisper, laugh. I'll ask my wife to send some information. I'd rather be scolded. It's late. When I grabbed my bag and ran out of the room quickly, I didn't care about picking up the breakfast that my aunt handed me. The man sitting at the table spoke slowly. Do you want to take my car? I put on my shoes for a moment. A faint voice sounded behind him, full attendance award. Don't you want it? I changed my shoes and got up, and negotiated with him about the conditions. Then you can send me to the Nantang intersection, and I will run over the rest by myself. Stan Truman scoffed. He scooped up his suit jacket from the back of his chair, and said, I don't know what you're worried about, as he passed me. What to worry about? Naturally, I was worried that my colleagues would find out that I was married to the president. It has been a year since I got married. This year, I was scared and cautious in the company. Wasn't it because my colleagues were afraid that my colleagues would find out about the unspeakable relationship between me and Stan Truman? In the car, Stan Truman and I sat on one end of the line. He turned his head to look out the window. Unlike most bosses, Stan Truman doesn't like to read any documents in the car. He says he faints. When he was in the car, he often looked at the scenery outside the window and the pedestrians passing by. I whispered, Stan Truman, it's almost a year. That divorce. I mustered up the courage to say it. Stan Truman lowered his eyes and flicked his watch lightly. The divorce settlement lawyer is already drafting. I have a lot of property. Maybe you have to wait a little longer. Understood. I'm obedient. It's okay to wait, as long as you can get a smooth divorce. The choice to sign a one-year marriage agreement with Stan Truman was also forced by the situation. Now that you can get married quietly and divorce quietly, it's not too cool. Unburdened by the burden on my mind, I happily waved at Stan Truman. I got off at this intersection. Thank you for seeing me off today. Stan Truman looked at me, with a striking smile on his face, his eyes narrowing slightly. Then he regained his mildness. Well, I'll see you at the company. I thought he was just polite. After all, he is a big president, and I am a small employee, and the possibility of meeting in the company is almost minimal, until a colleague gave a short notice that the project discussion in the morning would have to change venues. The original conference room was occupied. Stan Truman is going to have a high-level meeting in the same room where he was going. The office was buzzing like a frying pan. Of course, it's just lively online, and everyone is as quiet as a chicken offline. Colleague Veronica Jo frantically chatted with me, first-hand insider. Do you want to know why Stan Truman changed the conference room? Me, say. Veronica Jo, it's said that the upstairs conference room smells of perfume and smokes us Stan Truman. I really didn't know what to say for a while. Stan Truman is so picky at home, but is he so picky at work? Veronica Jo, actually, it's mostly Stan Truman, who is in a bad mood today. Veronica Jo, it's said that his face was black when he joined the company, so be careful not to touch his head. I typed, yes, all morning. Our floor was surprisingly quiet. Usually, there will be idle colleagues to play around in the department, but today everyone sits at the workstation, and is honestly busy with the work at hand. After all, everyone knows that Stan Truman and a group of bigwigs are in the meeting next door. This deterrent is simply indescribable. At 10 a.m., the project discussion started on time. I sat next to Veronica Jo in the corner of the conference table. It's not for the convenience of fishing, but because minions like us are not qualified to participate in the discussion. The reason for participating in the meeting is also to play a role in auditing and learning. While I was studying, my phone rang suddenly. I screamed badly. After hanging up the phone in a hurry, he also made eye contact with the department head, who was talking. He has always been lenient with me, and this time was no exception. He motioned to me. Go ahead. I pursed my lips. It just so happened that there was a second call, and I was afraid that something was urgent, so I had to sneak out the back door to answer the phone. On the other end of the line was Stan Truman's grandfather, Lauren Horatio. Are you going home to dinner with the stinky boy tonight? No matter how many times I've heard the word, I can't equate those 3 words with Stan Truman. I was embarrassed and said, I'll have to ask him what he means. Don't ask him. I don't know what I'm busy with all day, and I don't know how to answer phone calls. Matt said, you come by yourself. As soon as you came, that kid came with you. I don't agree with the words, I whispered. Grandpa, what's the matter? Your grandmother, she's going to divorce me. The little old man, who is almost 80 years old, is babbling about his grievances on the other end of the phone, to the effect that Grandma recently played electronic chess with another grandfather. He was jealous and muttered a few words, but he didn't expect to provoke Grandma's disgust, which eventually caused this crisis in the old couple's old age. Matt's voice was aggrieved. I'm just afraid she'll hurt her eyes. I hurriedly reassured him and promised to go over tonight to help him coax his grandmother, Lauren Horatio. Matt sighed. I can only rely on you. After hanging up the phone, my head was dizzy. Remembering that the discussion was still ongoing, I raised my leg and walked to the conference room. The conference room I used to use was right in front of me, and I subconsciously pushed the door open. It wasn't until the door opened that I realized something was wrong. The meeting room has changed. It's a pity that the door is open. Everyone in the conference room looked at me in unison. There are no familiar colleagues, no lenient supervisors, all black and pressed. All big guys in suits and leather shoes with serious faces. I gasped. Just as I was about to kneel down to apologize and close the door, my department leader suddenly stood up, presumably trying to distance himself from me. He shouted, who let you in? Don't you know if you have a long brain? This conference room has been requisitioned. What are you doing there? Don't you see that everyone is being delayed by you? He said impatiently. Close the door and fuck me off. I'm glad that this, fuck off, is about to slip away. In the silent conference room, the man sitting at the top suddenly sneered. Stan Truman looked up at the emotional department leader. I'll ask Madam to deliver some information. He stroked his cuffs slowly and patiently asked, Truman Clara, do you have any comments? Truman Clara's face was bloodied in an instant. He was speechless for a moment, and stammered for several seconds before he remembered to answer. No. Pin drop can be heard in the meeting room, facing the meaningful gaze of the big guys. All I could think of was indignation. Stan Truman. I'm going to get divorced, and I'm going to make this show public. What's next? Stan Truman is a man who has seen the world, and has a very stable mentality. When I was so embarrassed that I pulled out the dream castle, he could still calmly lie. What about the information you sent? I had to bite the bullet and go forward. I didn't have any information at hand, only my mobile phone, so I clicked on the memo and typed a few words, and pretended to hand it to him. Grandpa called you home for dinner tonight. He chuckled, and praised me with a smile in his eyes. Well, that's it. It's hard for you to run. Why didn't he enter the entertainment industry if he had this acting skills? Stan Truman pretended to look through the documents. I stood next to him waiting for my phone. In just a few tens of seconds, it can be described as the longest dozens of seconds in my life. All the higher-ups were looking at me, secretly looking at me, both openly and secretly. The look is different, but they all only expressed one meaning: this is the president's wife. My department manager, Truman Clara, had a particularly wonderful expression: remorse, hatred, fear and fear. It was an eye-opener for me to be able to present so many expressions on the same face at the same time. Stan Truman got into the game and handed me back the phone. Don't forget to answer me. Thank you for your hard work, wife. As soon as these words fell, I clearly saw that the ears of all the leaders were pricked up. It seems that eating melons is human nature. It's just that this time it's me, and it doesn't feel good. I cautiously poked Stan Truman, and motioned for him to clarify. He looked up at me meaninglessly. I gritted my teeth and reminded, what about the hidden marriage? If the news of my marriage to the president had come out of this conference room, I was afraid that I would not have been able to walk out of the company today. Stan Truman chuckled and cleared his throat. Madam is relatively low-key. I don't want to hear the company spread her rumors. What to say and what not to say, you all know, right? He knocked on the table without moving. The crowd replied awe-inspiringly. At this point, I hung a heart back in my stomach. Just as I was about to slip away, Stan Truman suddenly reached out and grabbed my sleeve. In front of the public, in full view, he lowered his eyes and whispered, Come with me to Grandpa's house for dinner tonight. It's nothing to go to dinner. But why should he put on such an expression that can't be put on the table? It's still in the conference room. I glared at him and fled. That day, I was scared until I got off work. But luckily, no one in the company spread rumors about me and Stan Truman. It seems that the mouths of all the bigwigs are very strict. I sat in Stan Truman's car and breathed a sigh of relief. Stan Truman stopped looking out the window and looked at me instead. As for it, it's such a shame to have an affair with me. It's not a shame or not a question. I wanted to explain, but I didn't think it was necessary. I'm going to get divorced anyway. I clasped my hands together and begged. I hope that after the divorce, Stan Truman will be able to keep them from talking nonsense like he did today. Stan Truman gave me a meaningful look. You really want to divorce me? I blinked in dismay. Don't you want to? He snorted coldly, but did not answer. The silence spread all the way to the Truman family's home. When I heard that Stan Truman and I were coming back, his grandparents were standing at the door early in the morning. It's just that the position is awkward, and anyone with a discerning eye can see that the two are arguing. After getting out of the car, I secretly made an okay gesture to Matt. Leave it to me. Matt nodded gratefully. I was juggling out the words in my head as Deirdre complained to Stan Truman about Matt's stinky problems. Stan Truman listened quietly and was suddenly surprised. You want to divorce Grandpa? Then he looked at Matt and found an alliance in a long voice that said, it's hard to be a grandmaster. As soon as these words came out, the room fell silent. The old couple, who were still arguing at first, stopped making trouble and aimed their guns at me and Stan Truman. You're going to get a divorce? Why? Who mentioned it? Didn't you stinky boy do something sorry for Lauren Horatio? I'll just say that they are not close to each other. And you still don't believe it? Humph. It must be that this stinky boy won't coax his daughter-in-law. You're very good at coaxing. Isn't the problem of a hard mouth inherited from you? Okay. Matt stammered a few times, then turned on to scold Stan Truman. Tell me about it. Why do you want to divorce in a good way? Stan Truman looked at me innocently. The old couple followed and looked at me. I was thrilled by this encounter. This is completely different from what I expected. Divorce does have to be honest with the old couple, but that is after everything has settled, not now when the agreement has not even been signed. In response to the worried eyes of the elder couple, I replied weakly, then why do you want to divorce? Matt was the first to say, we're not getting a divorce, we're having fun. Stan Truman followed, we're having fun, too. So far, everyone is happy. The crowd went to eat as if nothing had happened. Matt secretly gave me a thumbs up afterwards. Daughter-in-law, you're really good. Can only be said to be crooked. Stan Truman and I were left at the old house that night. Although I slept in a separate room, with his home in the city center, we naturally had to sleep in the same room in the old house. I've slept here a few times, so I'm not too nervous. Stan Truman seemed nervous. When he got out of the bathroom, he even wore his slippers backwards on his left and right feet. I kindly reminded him, but he stiffened. I like to dress like this. I laughed at him. It seems that you really inherited Grandpa's hard mouth. He didn't pay attention to me for a long time. It just so happened that I didn't want to pay attention to him, and continued to hold the computer to answer the questions of the new intern. His eyes swept over the screen at some point, and his tone was a little strange. If you're married, I don't think he has so many problems. What do you mean? Stan Truman lifted his chin. He's accosting. What are you kidding? I flipped through the chat log and showed him. He asked serious questions. If you're serious, you wouldn't ask so many questions. I think Stan Truman is weird. What's even more terrifying is that under his influence, I began to feel strange when I saw that serious conversation. I quickly ended the topic. It's a little late. Let's go to the company tomorrow to talk about something. The young male intern spoke in a lively tone and replied to messages quickly. Okay, thank you Sister Tilda. I'll bring you a loving breakfast tomorrow. Stan Truman said in a weird way. Okay, thank you, Sister Tilda. Tomorrow I will bring you a loving breakfast, Tilda. I closed my laptop with a headache and looked at him helplessly. What's wrong with you? Something wrong with a hard mouth, he rightly said. Inherit my grandfather's. Until I was lying in the same bed, I didn't mean to talk to Stan Truman again, but he somehow has a strong desire to communicate tonight. and the dark environment doesn't affect him from chatting with me. If someone gives you a gift, don't take it. Who gave me a gift? Those people who have a meeting today. I sat up straight from the bed in shock. Why did they give me a gift? You, Stan Truman said. My head grew in an instant. I thought that the page of the conference room had been turned over, but I didn't expect that there would be a chain reaction. What kind of gifts? How dare I accept a gift? What kind of president's wife am I? I panicked like an ant on a hot pan, but the culprit, Stan Truman, was still lying peacefully. I couldn't help but scold him. Why the hell are you calling me like that today? Do you need to ask? Stan Truman said. Truman, Clara scolded you like that. You can't say anything like that without a brain. I can't listen to it, I complained. Then you can't sacrifice me because of him. It's okay. Stan Truman reassured me softly. I ordered them not to give you gifts. Let's talk about it. I realized that Stan Truman was just saying this to amuse me. Isn't it interesting to see me get angry in a hurry? I took a few deep breaths, but I still couldn't bear it, and I made a serious accusation. You're getting weird. What's wrong with me? If you don't make it public, you call my wife directly in front of the higher-ups. I said I wanted to divorce, but I haven't even signed the agreement, so you let my grandparents persuade me to leave. I said angrily, if you do such a thing, I will suspect that you don't want to leave. Stan Truman was silent for a long time. Perhaps the darkness had peeled away the last of man's disguise, and I heard his low voice ringing in my ears. I really don't want to leave, but we said yes. I didn't realize the seriousness of the problem, and I was still arguing. Divorce after a year of marriage. It's written in black and white. How can you talk without words? Stan Truman said to himself. I don't want to talk. Why? He leaned over suddenly. The distance was so close that my heart jumped to my throat. His gentle breath brushed my cheeks, and I could even feel his dangerous gaze on my lips. Unconsciously pursing it, Stan Truman chuckled. I like you. Can't I see it? I was tempted to ask him how I could tell, but apparently, now is not the time to talk about this topic. I pretended to be calm, in order not to get divorced. Can you even make up this kind of nonsense? You know very well that I'm not making up nonsense, Stan Truman said in a serious tone. Lauren Horatio, don't run away from the topic of, I like you. Is so unpleasant to be called by the boss by name? Even in bed, I digested my emotions and asked him, why do you like me? I want to know, too, Stan Truman said. If only you could control your feelings. I know you don't like me. I know that we are married by agreement, and I know that you will leave me sooner or later. But I still, he confessed word by word, I can't help but like you. My heart swooped. Perhaps the dark environment is prone to ambiguity, and at this moment, I actually felt that my relationship with Stan Truman was very innocent. To prove my innocence, I turned on the lights. Stan Truman was caught off guard, and his whole body was exposed to my sight. That's when I found out that he was very popular, not only on the face, but also on the body. His short-sleeved exposed arms were all red, and his skin was white, like a hazy layer of powder, and he didn't let me see it more, so he quietly hid in the quilt. It turns out that he is not as comfortable with everything as he appears. After turning on the light, Stan Truman became timid and stammered, I'm just going to tell you that I like you anyway. His appearance was obviously much more vivid than that calm and self-contained boss in the dark. At first I was a little flustered. Now that I know that he is even more panicked than me, that emotion is instantly gone. If you like it, you can like it, I replied to him. He was stunned. That's it. What else? I deliberately teased him. You can't just because you like me and don't get divorced. It's you who like me, not you who like you. Stan Truman sighed in resignation. However, his emotions come and go quickly, and he quickly regrouped. The divorce settlement will still go according to your wishes. But before you do that, you have to be ready, he said seriously. I'll chase you. My heart itched inexplicably, for fear of being seen through by him. I don't chase in the company. Why? I insisted. Anyway, if you want to chase me, you can't chase me in the company. Okay. He looked very hurt. The room fell silent. The lights were turned on and the distance was widened. But I still felt that I was in an ambiguous state with Stan Truman. He likes me. These words went around and around in my mind. I finally understood that he and I could never go back to the pure agreement we had in the past. So tonight, you can't sleep together, can you? I was about to find an excuse to sleep in a separate room, and Stan Truman, whose cheeks were red, said restlessly, then if your husband is chasing you, can you have the right to be chosen first? Why still claims to be her husband? I accused him. You took advantage of me. He pursed his lips. That's the case. We are husband and wife recognized by the state. Ignore you. I got up, still holding my pillow, and walked out of the room. Stan Truman hurriedly grabbed me, and bowed his head to admit his mistake. I'm sorry. I'm not going to do this anymore. Sleep in separate rooms. I make a request. Oh, he immediately hugged the pillow and walked out. Before leaving, he didn't forget to look back and worry, don't be angry with me, okay? Looking at his low-eyed appearance, my heart was dark, and I repeatedly restrained the corners of my mouth from rising. The feeling of bullying the boss is too cool. Stan Truman also prepared a loving breakfast for me the next day. Latte art is loving. The omelette in sandwiches is loving, and even the fruit after the meal is cut into the shape of a heart. Matt Deirdre assists from the sidelines. Stan Truman. He wakes up early in the morning and gets busy, and he looks great. Granddaughter-in-law. Come and try it, Tilda. With the expectant gaze of the three people, I swallowed the breakfast with difficulty. Naturally, I took Stan Truman's car to work. He didn't look at the roadside scenery, probably idle and bored, and began to have nothing to say. If your brother, oh, and that guy brought you breakfast too, so please take a picture of me. Why, compare who has a better breakfast. I couldn't help but look at him. Are you Nave? Probably not. Stan Truman replied to me quite solemnly. After all, you're the first person to say that about me. Who would dare to say that about you? The car drove to the intersection of Nantang Road. I was about to get out of the car, but Stan Truman grabbed me and handed me the thermos he had at hand. You speak a little nasal in the morning. Drink some of this, and Grandma will take a sip and it will work. I was stunned and didn't answer. Stan Truman still stretched out his hand, but muttered, on the way to work. It shouldn't be like chasing you at the company, right? I swallowed it and hesitated. Thank you. Well, he said, ruining all my mixed emotions. Remember to take the male intern's breakfast. Is served? Childish ghost. What I didn't expect was that more childish things were yet to come. As he was at work, Stan Truman sent a message urging him, breakfast, breakfast, breakfast. I naturally received, but thanks to Stan Truman's repeated emphasis, even if the intern gave me delicacies from the mountains and seas, I didn't have the heart to appreciate it. It just so happened that Veronica Joe, who was at the next table, hadn't eaten breakfast, so that breakfast of love had already entered her stomach. I perfunctorily, are you all bored? Stan Truman, breakfast, breakfast. I'm annoyed, didn't eat, okay. Stan Truman, thanks. Suddenly I thought it was a lot of fun. Stan Truman's naivety was maintained until the end of the day. He was very conscious and sent me a message in advance. I'm waiting for you, at the intersection of Nantang Road. Actually, he didn't pick me up much before. After all, his car is very conspicuous, and I am afraid of attracting the attention of my colleagues, so I always avoid suspicion. In the past, such a pure relationship should be avoided, but now this is an unclear relationship. There is no reason not to avoid it, so I refused. Over time. Don't wait. Stan Truman didn't reply. I guess he left on his own. I sat in the office for a while, and waited until my colleagues were almost gone, and then I got up. I happened to meet a supervisor who also got off work late. Curran Vebron still had a gentle smile on his face. Off work. How's the intern going? I see that he is very energetic in his studies. Will he feel struggling? It's fine. He asked questions about work, and I replied on business, until he glanced at his watch and said casually, it's not early. Shall I treat you to dinner? I looked at him hesitantly. He smiled and said, don't be embarrassed. After work. I'm not your leader. You can refuse if you want to. I was about to refuse, but he spoke again. Can you give me a chance? Curran Vebron had a hint of anticipation in his eyes. Actually, I really like you. I froze, because of his words, but also because of Stan Truman, who appeared behind him. He had a blue face, obviously with a bad expression, and he didn't know when he came, and how much he listened. Corinne Veblen turned his head with my gaze, and naturally saw Stan Truman as well. His expression was much more serious, and even his body straightened up in an instant. Stan Truman. Stan Truman stepped forward with a cold face, glanced at me nonchalantly, and then looked at Corinne Veblen. Where are you going to eat? I'm just on the way, so I'll drop you off. Didn't say the destination? This is a kind of way. However, Corinne Veblen's brain seemed to be down, and he didn't notice the loophole in Stan Truman's words, and said respectfully, I haven't decided yet, so I won't bother Stan Truman. Stan Truman sneered, no trouble, the atmosphere is. I was really afraid that Stan Truman would say something about it again, so I hurriedly said, Director, I suddenly remembered that I was in a bit of a hurry, and I had to go first. Corinne Veblen said slowly, then I'll come back to you for dinner another day. Against Stan Truman's meaningful gaze, I slipped out the door of the company. After less than 2 minutes of walking, Stan Truman's car appeared beside him and followed. I didn't get in the car, so he followed. I looked around and looked with a cold face. Unexpectedly, Stan Truman's face was even colder than mine. Why can he chase you in the company? I didn't let him chase him. He's going to invite you to dinner. Stan Truman was thoughtful. The reason why you don't let me chase in the company is because you want the red flag at home to not fall, and the company flag to flutter. I looked at him in disbelief. You're unreasonable. Oh, Stan Truman said in a cool tone. Is Corinne Veblen very understanding and gentle? I gave him a blank look, and decided not to say a word to this idiot tonight. Returning home is naturally a cold war. Thanks to the large space at home, there is no need to stare at Stan Truman. I played games and watched dramas and skincare, and tossed until 10 o'clock. An email from the president's office popped up on the top of the phone. Notice on prohibiting romance between superior and subordinate offices of the same department. I clicked in with wide eyes, glanced at it cursorily, and headed straight for Stan Truman's door with my phone in hand. I didn't even bother to knock on the door. I pushed the door in, saw Stan Truman and yelled, why don't you just give me and Corinne Veblen's ID numbers? Stan Truman turned his head in astonishment. In a hurry, he only had time to cover his lower body with a bath towel. My vicious momentum instantly became like a landslide. Why don't you wear clothes? Stan Truman's ears were red, and he slowly lowered his head to tie the bath towel and explained, I just came out of the shower. I can't do without clothes. I'm guilty in my heart. Stan Truman was probably shrimp. His skin was pink again, and I looked at the unobstructed abs in front of me and suddenly forgot what I was here for. Stan Truman straightened his towel and asked, what's going on with my ID number? What's the matter with the notification? For the sake of the company's great prospects, he said, if everybody is all about falling in love like Corinne Veblen, how is the company going to grow? I choked him. You're still thinking about falling in love with me all day long. Well, I'm different, says Stan Truman, and I'm in a relationship where I can better drive the company. Who's going to fall in love with you? I couldn't help suppressing him. The agreement will expire in 10 days, and we will divorce by then. Stan Truman for a moment. Dangerous steps came towards me. He was wearing only a loose bath towel around his body, and his shoulders, arms, and even ankles were pink, and the impact of this picture was simply self-evident. Before he could get closer, I was already stammering, don't come closer, just stand there and say anything. Stan Truman finally stopped at arm's length from me. My cheeks seemed to feel the heat of his warm body, and I didn't dare to look at anything, but it was hot everywhere. Stan Truman's cold, textured voice was puzzled. Why do you have to divorce me? Actually, I didn't figure it out myself. In my preconceived notion that Stan Truman and I were working together. When the agreement expires, he and I are going to divorce. So in the year of marriage, I never dared to think about him. Even Stan Truman is a person who is in line with the traditional sense of excellence in every way. Occasionally, there will be a colleague nymphomaniac, and it would be nice to have a sweet relationship with Stan Truman. Even though I had the right time and place, I never thought so. He is the big president. I am a small staff. No matter what the outcome of the relationship, it will definitely be me who will be hurt more. I cherish my job and am very satisfied, so I don't want to have too much to do with him in the company. After all, the consequences of losing both people and money are not pleasant. Was worried about hiding his marriage for a year, and he thought that he could finally end the whole thing peacefully. But who knew that he was suddenly tempted? My stubborn heart began to waver. To be honest, I really don't know what to do. Insomnia until 3 in the morning. The next day, I went to work with heavy dark circles under my eyes. Colleagues are also all panda-eyed, but they are excited to eat melons. Veronica Jo was the first to share with me. Why didn't you come to the water group last night? Everyone is guessing which department kept Stan Truman from sending notices in the middle of the night. I glanced in Kerwin Veblen's direction. What did you guess? I don't know. I'm shocked when I say it. Veronica Jo was emotional. The bald head in the sales department, the one who was fired by Stan Truman, sent ambiguous messages to female employees behind his wife's back in the middle of the night, and brought photos of that kind of place. My expression contorted. It's said to be small, though. Ha ha ha. And the marketing department, that handsome little guy who looks like a dog hooked up with 3 female employees behind his back. My expression gradually spiraled out of control. Veronica Jo told me all morning gossip. I was amazed and amazed. In the end, I even had the delusion that my secret marriage to Stan Truman was not a big deal. During my lunch break, I bumped into Stan Truman coming out of the conference room next door. Veronica Jo muttered, "Do you think you've been seeing Stan Truman a lot lately?" A female colleague next to her chimed, "And I heard that he has been meeting on our floor a lot lately, and even the conference room on the top floor has been abandoned." Why? I don't know. Veronica Jo looked left and right, wondering, is there anything on our floor that particularly appeals to him? I silently lowered my presence. But Stan Truman's presence is just too strong. I feel like I can see him every day, and my colleagues around me are talking about him, and I can't avoid him anywhere. Under extreme pressure, I decided to talk to Veronica Jo about some of the truth. That I have a friend. Veronica Jo's eyes lit up suddenly. You say, she and her husband agreed to get married, each for its own reasons. Originally it was good to only be married for 1 year. But her husband suddenly said that he liked her. Then she kind of didn't know what to do. Is that husband tall? Is it handsome? Is there any money? I thought about it, then nodded. Then take him down, Veronica Jo said. When the meat is delivered to your mouth, how can you let it go? But she and her husband are in the same company. In case they break up, why are you thinking about breaking up before you talk about it? Is marriage a rush to divorce? I pursed my lips. She's just going for a divorce. This time it was Veronica Jo's turn to be silent. She pondered for a moment. Actually, I feel that your friend is still a little interesting to her husband. If she didn't have an idea, she wouldn't be bothered by this matter and just divorced. She looked at me as if asking, "You said yes, right?" I lowered my eyes as if I had been stabbed. Maybe, in hindsight, I kept wondering what I thought of Stan Truman. Before I could think to a conclusion, Stan Truman had already taken advantage of my lunch break to call me upstairs and handed me a copy of the agreement. Divorce settlement, he said. Mr. Wu has already made a preliminary preparation. What are the problems? My knee-jerk reaction was to resist. At this moment, I realized that I didn't really want to sign. But Stan Truman's words were cold, not at all as tender as before. And I didn't even dare to say it in front of him if I regretted it. I tugged the agreement into my arms, and took a step back. I'll see it later. Aren't you in a hurry? There's no hurry. Stan Truman watched me leave and added, I'll go to my grandparents, and tell me that you can leave if you want, and you don't have to worry about it. Well, I looked at him, with my back to the door. Thank you for being willing to pay for my grandmother's medical bills. The medical expenses are written into the agreement. What to say thank you? Stan Truman said, if I hadn't married you, I wouldn't have been able to inherit the family business. Yes, that's why we agreed to get married in the first place. Regardless of feelings, each takes what he needs. Now that the marriage is finally coming to an end, I can barely read the look on Stan Truman's face. He smiled and said, Lauren Horatio, I'm so happy to be married to you. The divorce agreement was sealed in a drawer in my office. I kept scolding afterwards. Say yes and like it. What about chasing me? Why should you divorce when you should divorce, and not drag your feet at all? I thought to myself that this is not what the lofty Stan Truman likes. I scolded and rejoiced. I'm glad I didn't say anything to him, and I'm glad I didn't end up with both money and money. Thankfully, this marriage will start quietly and end quietly as I expected. Veronica Jo suddenly tugged at my face. What do you think? The expression is so fierce. Think of a jerk. She smiled. It's time to report. Bring your computer. Hurry. I gathered my emotions and hugged the computer into the conference room. There will be a group debriefing later, and I am the main reporter of our group this time. I've been preparing for a long time beforehand, so I'm sure that even if Stan Truman is a jerk, it won't affect my state. The truth is as I expected. After the debriefing was over, I took advantage of the intermission to go to the bathroom. I didn't expect to come back after going to the bathroom, and the sky has changed. Everyone was staring intently at the big screen in the conference room, which was showing my chat history page. That's when I remembered that it was my computer projecting. The person who sent the crazy message was Stan Truman. Wife, don't sign. I'm wrong. Don't divorce me, okay? I just want to test you. I have no intention of getting a divorce. I'm pretending. I'm so careful. You don't know how much heartache I felt when you turned to leave. Wife, please, why don't you go upstairs? I'll kneel down for you. I'll kneel down and beg you. I don't want to get divorced. I won't harass you in the company. Whatever you say in the future is what you want. I don't mind if you want the red flag at home to not fall, and the company's colorful flags fluttering. Wife, take care of me, please. I looked at the other party is importing, above, and my eyes were so dark that I almost passed out. With everyone's eyes in view, I hurriedly stepped forward and turned off the computer. The room was as quiet as a dead person. Everyone lowered their heads, looking like they wanted to look at me, but didn't dare to look at me. I pretended to be calm and walked up to Kerwin Veblen. Director, I want to take a leave of absence this afternoon. Okay. Kerwin Veblen's voice trembled. You can do as long as you want. I thanked him and hurried out of the conference room with my computer in my hand. With nowhere else to go, I went home, somewhat discouraged. Discouraged himself. He seems to be messing everything up. The marriage is gone, and the career is bumpy. You don't have to guess to know that my colleagues must be talking about me. Veronica Jo is so enthusiastic about eating melons. He must have heard first-hand information in various groups. Don't want to look at your phone. I hugged the pillow into the sofa and thought, just die like this. In the next second, Stan Truman broke in. He was probably in a hurry. His hair was a little unkempt. His forehead was sweaty, and even his usual meticulous shirt and trousers were wrinkled. When he saw me, he breathed a sigh of relief. Then he apologized in a low voice. I'm sorry, wife. I didn't know you were working. It's okay, I said. It's happened. Stan Truman approached in 2 steps. He hesitated for a second, and only crouched in front of me. This hesitation made me suspect that he wanted to kneel in the first place. Stan Truman said, there's a remedy. I can order everyone in the company not to discuss this. I interrupted him. What are you doing? Everyone just loves melons, and they didn't make any mistakes. Take 10,000 steps back. I'm just being a melon owner once. Stan Truman was silent for a few seconds. I'm a little scared of you. He put his face in front of me. Why don't you hit me a few times? I don't worry about you like this, and I don't want to let myself go. I pushed him away and muttered, let's talk about divorce. Stan Truman really got down on his knees this time. I don't want a divorce. I'm dead in the office, and only those words on Wish It are true. I don't want to take Joe again, and I don't want to go through another scene where Stan Truman dumps me with a divorce settlement. So I seriously asked, how long can you like me? Stan Truman was stunned for a moment by my question. He replied earnestly, I'm not sure if there is eternal love, but I'm sure I'm a person who has always been there. I will like you, and will always like you, forever. I held out my arm to him. Stan Truman, keep liking me. Stan Truman hugged me tightly, and said very sincerely, okay, the marriage is safe for the time being, but the hurdle in the career is still there. It wasn't until 11 o'clock in the evening that I had the courage to pick up my phone. Not a single unread message. If I wasn't the owner of the melon, I would really suspect that the operator blocked my signal. I contacted the most familiar Veronica Joe, take me one with you to eat melons. Veronica Joe hesitated, do you eat your own melons too? I typed, my own food is more fragrant. Veronica Joe was silent for a moment, then forwarded me a lot of screenshots of the chat. Veronica Joe, dear Mrs. President, this is a small chat log carefully selected for you. Please review. I clicked on 2 of them and pinched my eyebrows with a headache. I've heard that Lauren Horatio is Stan Truman's wife. Conference room, projection, wife. I beg you not to divorce, crying, knock on the point, kneel on the ground and beg. I really didn't expect Stan Truman to be like this in private. Lauren Horatio really gives us women a long face. I know. What happened to the notification some time ago? Kerwin Veblen was chasing her during that time. OMG. Incense for Kerwin Veblen. Grace. According to eyewitnesses, Kerwin Veblen's face changed on the spot, and his voice trembled when he spoke to Lauren Horatio. Truman Clara's sudden change of department. Is it also related to Lauren Horatio? It is said that Lauren Horatio ran to the wrong conference room in the previous meeting, and he scolded Lauren Horatio in public for being brainless. And then Stan Truman stood up and said, this is my wife, Truman Clara. Do you have any opinions? Ha 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 ha. Stan Truman is so handsome. My blood gauge is empty. Damn, why did Lauren Horatio get divorced, when she eats so well? Wait for inside information about the divorce. Are there any melons? Are there any melons? I won't sleep tonight, and I'm going to eat this melon thoroughly. Eating the melons of the president and the president's wife is exciting. I think it's really exciting, but I don't know if my relationship with Stan Truman is settled, or if the chat history isn't as scary as I thought it would be. I felt a little lighter. Veronica Joe sent another message. Now the group is begging you and Stan Truman not to divorce. Why? Veronica Joe, fearing that Stan Truman will be frustrated and start a major layoff. No, it won't. The words didn't seem to soothe the emotion, and I typed again, I've reconciled with Stan Truman. Veronica Joe, thank you, Mrs. President, for saving everyone's lives. Veronica Joe is worthy of being a melon eater, and in the end, he even gossiped about me. Did Stan Truman really kneel and beg? Did he get on his knees and beg you not to divorce? I quickly typed, sleep. Before going to bed, Stan Truman knocked on my door. Wife, can I sleep with you tonight? I hesitated for a moment. I'm not ready yet. I promise not to do anything. Stan Truman's ears reddened. I just want to be with you, whatever you do. I hesitated to let him in. Stan Truman was lying in my bed, looking more well-behaved than he had ever been in the old mansion before. We suddenly remembered that he was also a party to today's social death. Do you want to see it? Those chat logs. I told you truthfully. It should have a big impact on your image. I don't care what people think of me. I only care what you think of me. I blinked, and my heart was filled with sweetness. Do you have to go to work tomorrow? Stan Truman asked. Or do you want to take a break? Let's go to work. I took a deep breath. The male colleagues who were originally assigned to the company, and are still protecting the mistress in their hands, have the courage to go to work. And I don't think it's okay for me. Stan Truman was amused by me. Who is this? I won't tell you. The name is not said, but it can be said that gossip deeds. Stan Truman and I shared a lot of things about eating melons that night. Stan Truman sighed. Our company is really crouching tiger, hidden dragon. I looked at him with a smile. It was only then that I realized that I was closer to him, closer than any time before. Stan Truman stared at me for a few seconds, grabbed the back of my head, and leaned over to kiss me. The lips and teeth are intertwined, and the ears and temples are grinding. When he let go, the corners of my mouth still seemed to have the touch of the tip of his tongue. I've wanted to kiss you like that for a long time, he said, on the night of the confession. Actually, I think a little bit about it, too. Hey, your lips were red, and I wondered what it was like to kiss you. Stan Truman approached me again and whispered, aren't your lips red now? Don't you wonder what it's like to kiss? I couldn't push him away, and he held him down and kissed him firmly. Thanks to the slimy Stan Truman, the night was a long toss. When I woke up the next day, it was close to my usual time to go out. I panicked and got out of bed and glared at the culprit leaning against the doorframe. Why didn't you call me? It's all your fault. Take my car. Before I could react, he said, I don't get off at the Nantang intersection. Let's enter the company together. Okay. It was only then that I understood his intentions. I hugged the quilt and asked him, can I deduct your attendance award if I am late? Stan Truman waved his hand. Whatever you want. I smiled and he pulled me up, and I didn't hurry to get on that wonderful journey to work. The end.